complaints breed more complaints. And the more you complain about a problem, the more intense the problem feels and the more fuel you have to complain about the problem. You're listening to the Life Edit Project podcast, where busy, ambitious high achievers get the tools they need to fight perfectionism and overwhelm so they can smash their goals without all the drama. I'm your host, recovering overachiever turned professional life coach, Elizabeth Burrows. Let's get to it. Good day, good people. Welcome back to the Life Edit Project podcast. As always, I am your most favorite podcast host and life coach, Coach Elizabeth, and I am back on the mic with another juicy episode. Yes, today I am excited because this isn't just another regular episode. Because I'm always excited for these episodes, but I'm especially excited today because I am kicking off a new mini-series for the month of May in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. One thing about me is that I am an advocate for mental health and for mental wellness. So, of course, I was going to do something here on the podcast in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. Actually, if you've been listening to this show for a while, you might recall that I actually launched this podcast last year in 2023 during the month of May. And that was really because even though it has taken me a while to, I think, find my podcasting voice, I have always envisioned this show as a resource that supports the mental health and well-being of anyone who tunes in. So every topic that I cover, from perfectionism to self-care to analysis paralysis to productivity, I am working my very hardest to approach these topics in a way that will allow you to walk away with more options, more tools, and ultimately more hope and belief in your own ability to handle whatever it is that life throws your way. I don't know if that's the way that this show has been received. I don't know if y'all are picking up when I'm laying down every episode. Either way, today we are kicking off this 5-part mini-series of conversations where we are centering mental health in an unmistakable way, just getting all up in your face with mental health. So, what is in store for this mini-series? For one thing, it won't just be me here speaking into the void that is the world of podcasting. I'm actually going to bring on a couple of special guests that I'm very excited about, mental health experts who can help us dive into some different aspects of mental health that I think will be really relevant and really interesting to you all, my lovely listeners. So definitely stay tuned in all month long. Just go ahead and do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed, and turn on your notifications so that you don't miss anything. But just in case you need a reminder, Wednesday is podcast day. So new episodes of this show, the Life Edit Project podcast, always drop on Wednesdays. And so far, they've been consistently dropping on Wednesday mornings. And of course, I'm in Eastern time zone here in the United States. So if you're in the States, Wednesday mornings, look for new episodes of the Life Edit Project podcast. Okay. All right. Those special conversations, those special guests are coming up soon, but today is still just me, which I hope you are pleased by, because this is my show. So you've been listening to me talk for almost a year. But I am kicking off this mini-series of conversations with a universal experience that we've all dealt with at some point or another. Today, we are talking about the impact that complaining has on your mental health. Are you ready? Let's go. So full disclosure, because you know I like to keep it real with you. The topic for this episode today has been inspired equally by recent real life situations, as well as an article that I read in the Harvard Business Review. So here's some context. Here's what you need to know. When the pandemic happened, and everything here in my local community, I live in South Florida, when everything shut down back in March of 2020, I began to work from home for the very first time in my entire life. Before that, every job I had ever held involved me going to somebody's office 5 days a week and interacting with a bunch of colleagues, clients, and random members of the public for many, many hours each day. So when the shutdown happened, I went from working in an office at that time that had like more than 50 people in it, and working on a collective impact initiative where I was basically wrangling 80 plus individuals to work in a bunch of work groups and committee meetings. So I went from that to being holed up at home in my little condo with my family of 3 people, including me. So it was a lot less human interaction, right? And y'all are like, yeah, everybody had that experience, right? We all went from interacting with the whole wide world to like just being at home, being ourselves. Got it. Well, even though the pandemic ended a while ago and, things reopened, I guess a couple years ago now. Wow. It's been a long time, y'all. So even though the pandemic ended a while ago, it was just a few months ago that I actually started regularly working with an office full of people again. And if I can be honest, I have to admit that I kind of forgot what that was like. So I had to completely adjust to a new routine and adjust to being in a new place, surrounded by new people. And I noticed that for the first few weeks, as I got used to office life again, I did a lot of complaining. And I'm not proud of that, but that is exactly what happened. But it stuck out to me. It jumped out at me because complaining isn't something that I do very much of very often. And certainly not, kind of across different areas of my life, right? I have so many other tools in my toolkit, and we'll get there eventually in this episode. So I started complaining all of a sudden, and I realized that I was doing all this complaining. And then as I developed relationships with the other humans that work in this office, I noticed that some of those people also do a lot of complaining. And because I am now in close and regular proximity with these other humans, I am exposed to a lot more complaining than I was when it was just me, my husband, and my kid isolating at home during the pandemic, or even as the pandemic ended and I was still just working by myself from home, just exposed to basically me. And if I was tired of interacting with other people, I could just like get off the internet, right? So yeah, I'm exposed to a lot more complaining now than I was just a few months ago. So I started doing a lot of complaining. I noticed that I was exposed to a lot more complaining. And then a few months later, I came across this article in the Harvard Business Review where the writer was describing essentially the impact that complaining had on the culture of a particular company. And when I read this article, all of the dots just connected in my head, all of the light bulbs went off, and things became very clear to me. So if complaining is bad for business, it's also bad for individual humans. Because get this, y'all, businesses are just groups of humans who are trying to work together towards a common goal. And every problem that shows up in a business organization is ultimately a human problem. And this particular problem, the problem of complaining, it seems like a small thing, but it can actually have a really big impact on our lives and on our overall mental health. And what's the deal, right? Like, why is complaining so much of a problem that I decided to devote an entire episode to it here on the podcast? So it's tricky. And complaining is tricky because it feels good, or at least it feels better when we complain in the moment, when we are in the act of complaining. it feels good to us. But complaining is not good for us. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons why. So, the first reason why complaining is not good for us is because complaining keeps our attention focused on the underlying problem. And instead of alleviating the problem, it intensifies it. So let me say it like this. Complaints are like potato chips. You can't stop with just one. The more you complain, the more you can find to complain about. So let me give you kind of a silly example. Let's say you start complaining about a pair of shoes that hurts your feet. If you start complaining about this pair of shoes, you're going to also be tempted to complain about how hard it is to find shoes that you like in your size, or how hard it is to find shoes in the exact shade of brown or bronze that you like, or that shoes are getting more and more expensive even though the quality of shoes is getting worse. Right? And so it doesn't matter even what it is you're complaining about. It can be a small thing or it can be a big thing. Whatever it is you're complaining about, complaining actually primes your mind to look for more things to complain about. And so instead of just complaining about the shoes that hurt your feet, you're now ready to also complain about all the clothes in your closet or about how hard it is to find someone to give you a decent pedicure. When you complain, you are more likely to develop what we call a negativity bias. That is, you start seeing the negative things, the things that warrant complaints, before you start seeing and noticing the positive things or the things that you can be grateful or appreciative of. Complaints breed more complaints. And the more you complain about a problem, the more intense the problem feels and the more fuel you have to complain about the problem. So that's one reason, and that's a really good reason alone to stop being such a complainer, to not complain automatically, right? But the second reason why complaining is not good for us is because complaining diverts all of our energy into an activity that has no possibility of solving the problem. So think about this. When you are complaining, here's what you're not doing: problem solving. When you're complaining, what you're not doing is considering the possibilities that are available to you. You're not entertaining different ideas, and you're definitely not processing your feelings. You're not using mindfulness techniques and practicing non-judgmental observation of the present moment. Nah, you ain't doing none of that. But here's what you are doing when you're complaining. You're using a crap ton of mental and emotional energy on the act of complaining. When you are complaining, you are indulging and overindulging in negative and very often unproductive thoughts and feelings. When you are complaining, you are spinning your wheels fast and hard, but you are going nowhere. The reason why it's problematic to divert all of our energy into the act of complaining is because you cannot complain from an emotionally neutral place. You actually get invested in the problematic situation when you complain about it. And the more you complain about a situation, it's like the more invested you become in perpetuating the problem. Because if the problem goes away, you no longer have a reason to complain. You've seen this in action. You absolutely have. Think about the person that is essentially a contrarian, right? They're complaining about something. And when you make a suggestion for how to fix the problem, they complain about the solution as well, right? They say, oh, this light switch doesn't work. The light doesn't come on. And so you say, oh, well, I can change the light bulb. And then they say, yeah, but then you plug in the lights and then my light bill is going to go sky high, right? This is what complaining can turn into when taken to the extreme. Even when solutions are placed before you, you are literally more vested in just having a reason to complain that you actually resist solving the problem that you're complaining about. And this is why complaining never leads to solutions. And therefore, complaining is not good for you. A third reason that complaining is not good for us, despite the fact that it might feel good in the moment, is because your complaining is negatively impacting other people. Because here's the thing, complaining is not a solo activity. When you complain about something, you are literally inviting other people into the emotional impact of the problem. You are expanding the reach of the problem beyond just yourself. And this is especially true when you complain to someone about something that they're not directly involved in, right? So, for example, if a coworker is complaining to you about their spouse, you're not in their relationship, right? But if they complain to you about their spouse, they've now brought the emotional impact of their marital problems to you, and it ends up impacting and affecting you. And one thing that's so tricky about complaining is that we often tell ourselves that we're not complaining, we're just venting. And when we vent, we're not working very hard to try to filter what we're saying. We're not being extra careful with our words. We're literally just trying to get the words out and we're trying to release the pent up feelings, right? That's the point of us, quote unquote, venting. But when we vent like this, we're usually just dumping these words and feelings out onto someone else without even thinking about whether or not that person has the time, the energy, or the emotional capacity to receive all of our word and feeling vomit. We don't know how they're feeling. We usually open up the conversation saying, let me just vent to you for a minute. And then we just go. We let it all hang out. And I'm not telling you that you should never vent or that venting is bad in and of itself. And I'm not trying to tell you that when you vent, you are actively harming your friends or your family or your colleagues or whatever. But what I am saying is that the brand of complaining that is venting leaves a residue on the people that you're venting to. So the person that you're complaining to, even if you're just venting, they might try to offer you advice. That means they're doing some emotional or mental labor trying to help solve your problem. But again, because you're in complaining mode, you're not in problem solving mode. And so you're resisting the solutions that they're throwing at you, right? So now they've just done all of that emotional and mental labor in vain. Or maybe the person that you're complaining to, they get upset on your behalf, right? You know who that is in your life. You have that one person that when you call them with an issue, they're always going to gas you up. If you call them with a problem, they are ready to go to war with you or for you, right? It doesn't matter, just say when, right? That person is getting emotionally involved in your complaint. Or maybe you're venting to the kind of person that is actively trying to tune you out so that they don't get emotionally wrapped up in the thing that you're complaining about. Whatever it is, however, the person that you're complaining to is responding to your complaint, they are doing emotional labor. And you probably didn't even ask for permission. You just did it. You unloaded on them. So, those are just three reasons why complaining isn't harmless. Complaining has a cost, and every time you complain, your mental health is affected. Your mental health depreciates. We make our problems worse, and we exhaust ourselves when we complain so that we don't even have the energy to actually work towards the solution. The impact of a complaint lives on so much longer than the actual complaint itself. So, if you are a person, if you're someone who has a habit or the tendency to complain, what should you be doing instead? What can you do instead of complaining that will actually have a more positive impact on your mental health? I'm so glad you asked. Thank you for asking the good questions. So, the first thing that I'm going to suggest is that you pay attention to the impact that complaining has on you. So, intuitively, we think that complaining feels good. But does it? Does it really? What does complaining do to your mood? How does your body feel when you're complaining or after you've just complained to someone about something for 5 minutes straight? What kind of mindset do you find yourself in when you are in the act of complaining or after you have finished complaining? If that list has too few pros and a bit too many cons, then you might want to decide to try something different, to complain less and do something else instead. So, the next thing I'm going to suggest is that instead of complaining, I want you to practice noticing, accepting, and processing your feelings in healthy ways. And the simplest thing that I can recommend to you in order to do this is to journal. So I love journaling. I recommend journaling to anybody who will take my suggestion, and I recommend it as often as possible because journaling is simple and it's accessible, and there's no wrong way to do it. Even if you are just taking your complaining and instead of doing it out loud to another person, you're just complaining into your journal, the act of taking your complaints private immediately mitigates the impact of your complaining because you're no longer pulling in another person or other people into that problem. You're no longer forcing other people to bear the emotional labor that comes with that problem, right? So that in and of itself can take the sting out of complaining. But in addition to that, journaling can also help you identify the feelings that are coming up. And it can also turn into a form of cognitive offloading, which then frees up your mental capacity and you will be less mentally exhausted and you will have more energy to devote towards solving the problem that initiated the complaint in the first place. The third thing that I suggest you do instead of complaining is to practice closing the loop. So, one of the problems with complaining is that it's open ended and there's no resolution to it, right? It's literally the opposite of solving the problem. And so instead of complaining, or rather, when you catch yourself complaining, I want you to challenge yourself to close the loop by asking yourself the question, so what? Or a variation of that question, so what am I going to do about this? These are simple questions, but they can have the very huge impact of redirecting your attention toward problem solving, toward a solution, instead of just keeping your energy focused on the problem. And then my fourth suggestion for you is instead of just complaining to someone, actually practice getting an outside perspective from another human. Complaining to someone about a problem that you have is very different than sharing a problem that you have with someone and having them validate your experience. When you're complaining, you are usually complaining at someone. Inviting someone in to validate your experience, though, creates a more meaningful interaction and the type of interaction that can actually lead to you feeling better. Of course, I can't end this episode without reminding you that one way to get an outside perspective on a problem from another human is to hire me as your life coach. So, this is definitely one of the ways that I support my clients. I give my clients a safe space to vent, to acknowledge and process and release their negative and intense emotions. And I do that without requiring them to change their feelings and without requiring them to pretend like they can deal with their problem in a way that's not authentic to them. But I do all of that, and I'm not just letting my clients complain at me. I am emotionally prepared to receive the emotions that you bring to me when what you just want to do is complain, right? So you don't have to prepare differently to come to me as your life coach, even if your instinct is to just complain. I will let you have your feelings, but I don't have to automatically agree that the thing you're complaining about is actually a problem, right? Because that's one of the skill sets that I have as a professional life coach. I can acknowledge and allow for feelings and thoughts without agreeing with them. And I can help you process your feelings without allowing you to indulge and wallow in unproductive feelings that don't serve you in moving past the problem, because that's not useful. So I will always redirect you into taking productive, solution oriented action. And that, my friends, is a great reason to hire me as your life coach instead of just complaining. So, when you're ready to stop complaining about your problems and start actually solving them, I'm here to help with my one on one coaching services. And the first step to finding those solutions and solving those problems is really, really simple. Just book a sales call with me and let's have a conversation about working together. The link to schedule is in the show notes as always. So, holla at your girl. In the meantime, I will be back in your ears next week with more juicy conversations all about mental health. And who knows, maybe there will be a special guest joining us next week. So you got to stay tuned to find out. All right. All right. Between now and then, I want you to practice talking about your problems without complaining about them. And then you let me know how that goes. Hit me up on social media. I am at Life Edit Project in all the places. All right. That's all for this week. I will see you next time. Peace. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. If you have a question or a favorite insight from today's conversation, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message on social media. I'm in all the places. My handle is at Life Edit Project, all one word. And of course, my accounts are linked up in the show notes to make it easy for you. So holla at your girl. I'll be back in your ears next week with a fresh episode. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Life Edit Project podcast wherever you like to listen so that you don't miss a thing. Until then, peace.